The other day we had an event at the ballpark at Oracle, and we invited Sac State and Santa Clara softball teams to join us for an event, kind of sharing about different jobs that are available in baseball. We had our scouting department present, our R&D department to present. I said a few things, some members of our coaching staff, etc. One of the questions that came up was from the Santa Clara coach that I thought was an awesome question. And it was posed to our scouting group. And the first question is, how many scouts do you have? How many area scouts do you have? The answer was something in the neighborhood of 50. And the follow-up question was, how many of those are women? How many scouts are women? And the answer was 0. So here we are at this event where we're talking about jobs in baseball that are available to the women on these softball teams and their coaches and anybody else that's in the room, but that's the answer to the question. So the follow-up question was, of course, why? And I think we can all do a better job of answering that question. Before I share my thoughts, I wondered if you had some thoughts as to why we have 50 area scouts and none of them are women.
I have a pretty, I think, different perspective on this. And, the easy finger to point is, oh, well, why aren't you hiring more women? And it's like, yeah, but what percentage of the resumes that you receive are from women? So I've kind of this is just so hard to combat in the media, and just things that are said about, well, we need to hire more women and we need to have, more diversity. And it's like, well, what percentage of resumes that we're receiving are from diverse candidates? And then you really get to the issue, which is there are no women applying for these jobs. Now, there are some women applying for these jobs, but let's say of the 5% of resumes that you get from women, how many of those resumes are truly qualified candidates? And that brings your pool of candidates to an even smaller amount. So, I think that's obviously changed a lot. I mean, rapidly in the last 5 years, but I can say with certainty. So reflecting back on 2014 is when I was hired full-time with the Cardinals in strength and conditioning. And I was a coordinator, so I'm receiving all the resumes. And so in 2014 through 2016, and then I was a Latin American coordinator, also reviewing resumes with the Astros. So over the period of 5 years as a strength and conditioning coach, receiving 3 resumes from women. So it's easy to say, well, why aren't we hiring more women? And the real issue is that they're not applying. And so then you ask the question, well, how can we get more women to apply? And one of my really good friends in the diversity and inclusion space always says, change happens from all directions. So it's change happens from the top down, bottom up, outside in, inside out. So how do we get more women to apply? And I think there's multiple answers to that question. But I always like to take the perspective, and it's definitely just a personal perspective of I'm not a victim, so it's we got to apply. Ladies, what do you mean? Why are they not getting hired? Not even receiving enough applications to say that we have truly qualified candidates for these jobs. There's been a lot of change in that space, but it hasn't changed all that much. And there's a lot of work to be done there.
Right. So, I mean, I guess you're big on taking responsibility. I appreciate that. The accountability is, I value that. So if you were to not be accountable for this one and on behalf of anybody else, but you're just and you sort of wanted to hold me accountable. You wanted to hold the industry accountable. Answer the question, if you will, why are there not more women applicants?
So, okay, so it changes from everywhere. When I say that part of the change is, it's bottom up. It's we have to do the work to make ourselves qualified candidates, and we have to apply for the jobs, and we have to sit at the table and ask for that opportunity. But there's the top down change where it's okay, well, we have to create channels and opportunities. And one great way to do that is to reach out and have softball teams, because softball is a great pipeline for baseball jobs. Have softball teams understand what their opportunities are. So when they're looking for jobs, they're going, oh, okay, I don't just have to look at softball jobs. I can also look at baseball jobs. I can also get on those websites and look for those jobs. And so it takes top-down action as well to create pipelines. I think MLB's done a great job with Take the Field providing those resumes directly to MLB teams. And then, it just takes like the visibility at the top level is wildly important to plant the seed in these young women's minds that they can actually apply for these jobs. So it's, my first way to go is, okay, let's be accountable and go bottom up, change, like we have to do the work and prepare ourselves for these jobs so that when we turn in our resumes, we get the opportunity. But as you mentioned, if we're going the non-accountable route, it's the major league teams that are accountable. And so it's like, you have to actively seek out opportunities to lift women up and at least create opportunities for internships, which we weren't even seeing until, I would say, in the past 5 years with forward coaches and development coaches, those kind of roles popping up where they can do internships. They don't have to jump right in to be a full-time coach if they've ever coached before. So I think that, you're leading me down the path of, okay, how can we create change from both ends? And that's definitely a way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly know better than to feel like, I've got answers here, right? I mean, I think that we're all just sort of exploring the space. I think we've identified a pretty clear problem. And I think that problem is actually hurting teams' ability to be better at their jobs, right? So this, for me, in my perspective, it's not a, hey, let's just get more diverse for the sake of being more diverse. I think the move is be more diverse because you're going to be better and you're going to be more competitive and your perspectives are going to get fresher and different and you're going to have some competitive advantage in the industry. Now, the continuation of that is that we're sports, right? We're professional sports. We are sort of the celebrities and not the human beings, not the people, but the teams are the celebrities for the businesses out there. Like, what are the New York Yankees? What are the San Francisco Giants doing? How are they attacking these problems? So then they see us attacking these problems with a more diverse group of thinkers and decision makers. And they're like, oh, we'll do the same. So now we're also becoming a better society. And if you really want to get a little bit idealistic about it or really zoom out, you can see that having a ripple effect in the way we communicate in the world. So I guess my question is like, do you see, first of all, that departments and sports are better immediately with more diversity, or do you not see it that way? Is it really just sort of survival of the fittest in competition?
I don't think it's an immediate, it depends. It's like, I'm gonna take probably the stance that most people wouldn't expect me to take, which is like, no. I think if they're qualified candidates, and by the way, qualified candidate doesn't have to mean you have the most experience or you played in the big leagues for 15 years or whatever. Like, it doesn't have to mean that. It's just, do you fit the role that's open, which could mean so many things, especially in today's game. So it's like, I think it should be more like, okay, we are truly looking at all of the candidates out there, whether they're a white male or a black woman or whatever. We're looking at everybody and we're trying to find the best person for this role. And we're colorblind or gender blind or whatever. Like, I don't necessarily think that you get a bunch of diverse opinions in the room and all of a sudden you're better. But I just think that we shouldn't limit ourselves to just one type of person, because then you just don't get the very best candidates. If you're just saying, well, can't hire that person because she's a woman, like, you're missing out on a possible wonderful candidate for whatever role that is. So I think it's more of like limiting ourselves to non-diverse candidates is what hurts people more than just going, okay, we need as many diverse opinions as we can. Now, there's another, diverse opinions doesn't necessarily always mean diverse people either, because you could have a bunch of the same type of person, if you will, and they're from all different kinds of backgrounds and they bring a lot of diverse opinions. So I think diversity is not just, it's not just a skin color or gender, it's just diverse thought processes, which you alluded to.
Right. And I personally think the best way to get to those diverse thought processes is not have people with the same upbringings, socioeconomic backgrounds, religions, like all of those things. It's my hypothesis. It's not not, I can't study it necessarily, or at least I haven't decided to study it, but it is my hypothesis that the way to get to that diverse critical thinking is through, in some cases, diversity of background. And sometimes that has a lot to do with gender, and sometimes it has a lot to do with race. I want to go back to one thing that I think is really important to dig into, which is the best candidate for the job. So your position is that we're going to be colorblind, and we're going to be gender blind, and we're going to select the best position for the job. My take on this is that we don't know shit, and we don't know who the best people for the jobs are. And to be more specific, I think none of us, men, women, Black people, white people, people from all different religious backgrounds, none of us recognize our own biases. So what we do is we say, this is the best fit for the job. And we have no idea what's driving us in that direction. We don't examine it very often. So I just don't think we know. So for that reason, I think we have to specifically push ourselves when it comes to evaluating candidates and say, is this person really a better fit for the job because they have this experience or that experience, or because they have the best makeup, right? This person has great makeup. Well, great makeup, that's a very subjective thing. Makeup is incredibly subjective. So you have to get past that when we hire and when we mentor, and we have to be a little bit more self-critical, which is, I don't know, I'm not sure that this is the better candidate. I've been doing this for a long time, but I'm probably missing a whole lot. So I don't know, what's your take on all of that? That's a lot. Start anywhere you want.
In your opinion, it's like, when I say the best fit for the job, I actually don't think experience matters, but it's like, what type of experience do you have? Like, and it's not necessarily that the experience, I'm not even talking about like resume job experience. I'm talking about, like you mentioned, where did you grow up? What did your parents do for a living? Where did they grow up? What's their background? Like, when I say experience, like, what kind of culminated life and resume experience do you have? And for what we need as a team, because as you know, it's like a recipe, right? It's like, they might be a phenomenal like candidate on paper, but is their personality, their background, their thought process, like, is that going to vibe with what's going on in that petri dish of your team? So when I say like the best candidate for the job, that's wildly subjective, as you mentioned. But I also, it's like, you can be, not you, but we can be, if we just said, well, I'm going to assume that I don't know anything, or I'm going to assume that I'm super biased, and which we all are, as you mentioned, we all have like our perspective that's been shaped over decades of our life and experiences. But I would also say, like, so are you saying that you intentionally sometimes go, oh, I really like this person for the job, but I'm actually just going to take a hard left and go over to this person because I'm like, I want to like shield myself from my own biases?
No, I think the way to manage that is by bringing in additional people into the process. And then when you are in the room with the other people that look like you, sound like you, have similar experiences to you, you ask yourself the toughest, most uncomfortable questions, which is like, what about this person is turning me off and why? Which is usually what happens. So this is my perspective. You have the candidate that feels like the rest of the people in the room, and then a candidate from a different background with a different skin color feels a little different for the group, and they can't quite put their finger on it, but something feels a little bit off, and they elevate the other person just a little bit. Sometimes they make up reasons why the other person is the better fit. So do I think we have to like automatically hire that that different person in the room? I definitely don't. But we have to start asking ourselves the more challenging questions. Like, I'll give you the best example I have. I worked with a coach for a really long time. This coach was a native Spanish speaker, and I tend, as you know, Rachel, tend to surround myself with pretty progressive people, and people who are, like using tech, like using data and stuff like that, right? Like that is my natural lean. This particular coach in that group wasn't very well liked. And a lot of people were like kind of asking questions like, why is this person, getting these opportunities? And what a group of us did was we just watched this coach with players on a regular basis and watched how the players were responding to this coach. And it wasn't the way any of us would have talked to the players, and it just looked a little bit different for this specific group. But he's an excellent coach, and it just comes in a different package for that sort of homogenous group of thinkers. So it's a microcosm, right? That happens all the time. If you have a group of traditional coaches and you pop in a very cutting edge progressive coach, that group of traditional coaches is not going to like it very much. And it's going to take a lot of effort for them to like this person and to think this person has good makeup and like has dirt in their spikes and has good like traditional baseball acumen. So am I saying like that group of traditional coaches should automatically hire that progressive style of coach? No, but that they have to challenge themselves to get past that thing that says this is not an effective leader, right? And so it happens more than anything else when it comes to people in different races and backgrounds and genders, for sure, in my opinion. I mean, think about the next step when we're talking about transgender individuals and the biases that exist there. It's going to take so much effort to get past that bias. So again, not a hard left, just, hey, let's get together as a group and challenge the shit out of ourselves to be good at really selecting who the best person is for the job. And to your point, who the best spice is in the mix.
Yeah. And then if you do have people in the room with different, diverse backgrounds, but again, it's like diverse backgrounds to me is not your gender or your, I mean, it is and it isn't. It's like your gender, your race, it's really just like your whole life culminated into like is an experience. So if you have people with different experiences and backgrounds, resume and life wise, they can spot your blind spot. You're like, I really like this person because of this. And they're like, Gabe, you really like that person because they lift heavy weight. Like you're not thinking clearly here.
Right.
And it's like, you're trying to you basically are trying to have diverse opinions so that all of your blind spots are covered by one another.
I think it's a great point, and I think it's a great analogy, right? It's really about languages. Does this person's language resonate with me? It's really hard to have somebody's language resonate with you that is a little bit foreign to a degree. So that foreignness means not something that you experience regularly in your work, right? So, but that person who has what is perceived to be like a language barrier in some degree or another is just maybe smarter, maybe a harder worker, maybe a better critical thinker. And we don't know it because there's this language barrier. So, and I've seen this happen with Black coaches too. We can't figure out, a lot of white people can't figure out why this Black candidate is going to be more effective than the white candidate. Because we don't necessarily speak the same language. I know that's probably, it's a stretch, it's a leap, but there's a lot of meat on that bone.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point with okay, I think the tide has turned quite a bit where you're probably more ostracized now if you can't use a computer than maybe 5 years, definitely 10 years ago, you were ostracized if you were using a computer. If you did have your phone out taking video, you're ostracized then. So things have changed quite a bit for many organizations, but it is interesting, like the coach that can't turn on the computer now, we look at that person and say, why is he or she here? Like, why can't we can find a candidate? But at the same time, like you said, they might be phenomenal in communicating with players, but I think the issue comes in when or if, okay, you're a phenomenal communicator with players, but are you able to communicate the information that we need communicated to those players? And if you're not, like, if you're that person that's bought into using data, and just when people say using data analytics, it's like just using objective information to make decisions, trying to take our biases out of everything. So using objective information to make decisions about whether that's evaluation, training, etc. Like, are you open to that? Great. Okay, you can't use a computer and make a fancy PowerPoint or fancy video thing that you did for a player. Okay, that's fine. But if you're this phenomenal communicator that players gravitate towards and love your energy, and you can communicate our message, then that's fine. So it's like the diversity, diversity means so many different things. And again, it's like maybe this person can be diverse in one way, but at the same time, when the question for you is, when is continuity, like what's the balance between, okay, you want diverse opinions, but you also need continuity. You can't have one coach being like, well, I think this, and then another coach is saying, I think this, and then you've got two different opinions for players. So, and two different maybe styles of thought for players, which can also be a detriment at times.
I mean, it can be, although there's a lot of players in a clubhouse, right? Like you're not trying to appeal to one player exclusively or five exclusively. You want to appeal to 26 and ultimately it's like 40, 50, 60, because you have obviously spring training, you have non-roster people, and now you're talking about a big group of players that need different styles to relate to. I can tell you, like, major league players right now, many of them still gravitate towards respect, believe, and appreciate the experience of a coach sometimes having difficulty opening up a computer. And so my thing is, like, have diversity to the degree that you can develop good interpersonal relationships, and the people that you bring into that mix have the ability to cover for one another some of their deficiencies, whether that be a coach that's having difficulty with technology, or whether it be a coach that is really technically savvy but can't hold the conversation to save their life. And then maybe that person, so instead of like trying to find the perfectly well-rounded unicorn on a staff and like duplicate that over and over, you have a wide-ranging group of people with different skill sets and personality types and backgrounds. And that's how you attack problems on a team as a group. If you're the CEO of the company and you're working by yourself all the time, maybe it is really important for that person to be able to do all of those things. But we work on teams. And so, yeah, I mean, I think finding people that can balance each other out, finding people that can cover for somebody else's shortcomings is critically important in this world. And I believe, it's my thought, that generally comes by hiring a diverse group of candidates, and then by mentoring and developing and figuring out ways to put that diverse group of employees in positions to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't, like, there's certain pieces of this that I couldn't agree more with, like where you have, it's not necessarily that person, like you said, doesn't have to be the most well-rounded unicorn. And if you put them in a role to succeed where they have their strong suits and they can be successful, then they're gonna be successful. But if you expect the person who can't turn on a computer to all of a sudden be making these beautiful, video comparisons like we see on Twitter or whatever, it's like, that's just not going to go very well. You try to clone a well-rounded unicorn, and there are a few of those out there, and they're becoming more because a lot of players that have played using data and like using objective information for their training environment, they're retiring, or they're coming out of their careers and they're wanting to be coaches. So we're going to see a lot more of those well-rounded unicorns, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years. But even then, there's going to be a need for still like diverse backgrounds, non-players, players, etc. But if you put the non-well-rounded unicorn into a situation that requires them to be a well-rounded unicorn is where we see the problem. So it's like, we're going to stick this coach in the big leagues that has never coached before and also like never played and whatever, and then expect them to just be able to like relate to everybody on the team. Obviously there's gonna be a problem with that. But if you take somebody and, as you mentioned, put them in a role that fits them, at least for the moment, and then mentor them in the areas that they need to catch up on, you might have more success with a situation like that. And it's happening to me right now. I mean, I just got hired as a manager. When Kevin Reese approached me and said, "Hey, we think you should be a manager," Kevin Reese is he's now our vice president of baseball operations, player development, excuse me. And he was like, "We think you should be a manager." I literally said, "Oh, fuck. Like, what are you talking about?" I was so laser focused on, okay, I'm a hitting coach. I'm honing these skills as a hitting coach. I'm, diving into this. And they brought this to me and I was like, guys, like, I don't know how to be a manager. I've been in a dugout for 10 years and I still don't really feel like I can jump down an umpire's throat, talking about obstruction right now. Like, I just can't. And they basically said like, no, I don't have a choice, but they were like, this is your role. Like, we need you to be on board with this and we're going to help you in every area that we can to get you ready. But you have these other qualities that are phenomenal in leadership and organizing a group and organization and all these things. So like, that's what we're interested in. And we'll get you caught up to speed on the infield fly rule. Like, we don't care about that, so they just did it with me. They're like, we don't need the typical manager that everybody, knows and loves, which is like the guy who played forever and has coached for 30 years and like, has a dip in his mouth at every second of the day. We all know those people. That's great. They're like, we don't need that. We have that in other areas. We need you in this particular area, and we'll mentor you in the other areas that you need to catch up on. That's exactly what's happening here.
Right. And I think that you saw a part of the conversation, and the Yankees probably had piles and piles of conversations that led up to the one that you had with Kevin, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my bet is that in the room, people were having to get past certain concerns, biases, like, okay, so what could go wrong here? Why, if we look a year down the road, why is this unsuccessful? And what's the upside and versus what the downside is of this being unsuccessful? And those conversations are happening. And somehow the Yankees got to the finish line and they said, this makes a lot of sense. And they were able to get past what I am sure were some biases in the room. So that's all I'm saying. This is what the Yankees did. We as an industry have really sucked at for a really long time, which is, okay, what are the skills that this person brings to the table? How good that can they be in this role if we just sort of ignore the things that we would normally look for? And by the way, like, I agree, like, knowing when to challenge an umpire on a call, it just pales in comparison to the ability to organize people and to be a model for people. So let's go on the scouting conversation that we have. Like, what's the most important thing about being a scout? One, it's evaluating talent, but also probably building relationships in small towns, getting to know high school coaches, getting to know college coaches, going into people's homes and having conversations with families. Like, if you think about the 50 best people for those jobs in any one organization, is there any chance that they're all men for the skill set that I just described? There's zero, right? So all this takes is, I'm not sort of like being self-congratulatory here. I'm working really hard on continuing to hone this perspective. But all it is that paradigm shift. Like, what are we on our end missing? What are the things that we can just do better immediately? And again, I think that thing is trying to put aside some of those biases that we all have.
And just look for the best candidate for that particular role, regardless regardless truly also of their resume, even, like, try to look past, okay, well, they have this great resume that's, perfect looking, and you know, even if you just take out gender, etc., they have this great resume, but like, is this the right person? Like you said, because you can't put relationship building on a resume. So it just depends on, like, again, their personality, their life experiences, their upbringing, and all those things. And how do you get to know that? I mean, unless you really welcome some different people into your organization and see where they fit and maybe where they can really elevate an area of your organization.